Good evening. Morning to me, evening to you. Welcome. Thanks for joining in. So today, some of the topics, under discussion are the remarkable release of audio from a private donor dinner in which Lev Parnas, Igor Frum, and Donald Trump were in attendance. So let's have a little look at some commentary surrounding these tapes. So let's have a look. Rachel Maddow is noting a striking moment in the tape when President Trump asks Lev Parnas how long Ukraine would be able to hold out in its war with Russia, the war that Russia has initiated. Without us, not long, 30 seconds. So that tape is from April 2018. And in 2019, as we all know, President Trump violates the law, violates the Impoundment Control Act, violates the separation of powers between the executive and legislative branches, and orders the withholding of congressionally appointed aid to Ukraine, $391 million worth of aid, which comprises all US military aid to Ukraine. So he does that in the belief and conviction that will involve Russia successfully taking over Ukraine. And he's holding Ukraine's safety hostage in order to win out either way. I guess he presumes he wins if his ally, authoritarian, corrupt, failed state Russia successfully acquires Ukraine, wins the war, takes over all of Ukraine. And he also wins if the Ukrainian president capitulates to his extortion attempts and initiates a sham investigation of President Trump's likely political rival for the 2020 election. That's the presidential rival that Trump is obviously most afraid of, and why people won't unite around Joe Biden, I don't entirely understand. But I think it's because America's political system encourages participation. And when you have participation encouraged, what you tend to do is develop beliefs. So you put your money where your mouth is, you invest in a candidate. For some people, when those campaigns turn a little bit cultish, when people manage to argue that they are the only people who can deliver certain outcomes, they become so attached to that outcome that it creates division. So instead of just being, yes, everybody get involved, pick a favorite, but when your favorite doesn't succeed, you still have picked that party as the political group you feel loyal to, and you devote your energies to helping your party succeed. In the case of candidates like Bernie Sanders, people become so attached to the idea that only Bernie can deliver, that Bernie is an outlier to the Democratic Party, that the party itself is not worthy of supporting, it's worthy of sabotage, it's the establishment. Then people who are upset that Bernie hasn't succeeded, that he's lost by millions of votes to another candidate such as Hillary Clinton, those people actively sabotage any potential for success by the Democratic Party in many instances, obviously not all. But to have a significant vein of people, let's call them Bernie bros, who campaign alongside of Russian intelligence officers on the internet to deride and degrade female Hillary Clinton supporters, calling them, ascribing very crude language to them and calling them traitors. I believe those were some of the strategies used in 2016 to repress the vote for the Democratic candidate. So you often get cult loyalty when people are suffering. But also, cult loyalty is just a byproduct of having somebody who's willing to try and whip up a cult following. So Donald Trump obviously has no moral compunction about using strategies to say, I am America effectively. I will put America first, and I am the only one who will do so. Similarly, Bernie Sanders rails against the establishment with the clear imputation that he is the only one who can solve the problems of the US. And I don't want to side with the Bernie-style argument that racism is caused primarily by economic problems. He can say, yes, racism is compounded by economic problems, but it denies the origins of racism, that racism springs from a faulty understanding of the world, that the world needs to be organized according to racial hierarchy, in which some people can derive a sense of superiority from the race that they believe themselves to be part of, and other people, and they should view other people as inferiors because they belong to a particular racial group. Racial groupings are to a degree arbitrary. We're all on different continuums of chromosomal makeup, but racists love to organize people into groups to jockey themselves into a position whereby they can feel some unearned superiority because of their membership in an in-group that they themselves have devised. And people do love to feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. So it's worse than nationalism when you get white nationalism, because white nationalists, as we can see, are very keen to betray America and keen for Trump to collude with Russians, provided it gives them a political advantage, provided it gives them access to greater power over their fellow residents of the US. So that's a little unfortunate, but yes. So up I have here today's charity. Let's see if we can look at that a little bit more clearly. The Florence Project, and I can put that up on screen for a moment. Thanks for joining in, by the way. And thanks for your patience. Just getting, here we go, Florence Project up. So that is a charity that looks after migrants. And obviously it's very necessary because the people who are most oppressed by Trump's corruption at present are the thousands upon thousands of children and adults suffering in detention centers around the US. So look at this motto with barbed wire. That's a fair representation of the type of conditions suffered by people in detention. We know that they've been deprived of access to hygiene products, hand washing facilities, adequate food. Many migrants have come down with food poisoning because of inadequate reheating of frozen burritos provided to them by US officials. So there's been a lack of care. Essentially, the hate rhetoric propounded by the Trump administration directly results in purposefully negligent and purposefully harmful behavior from US officials who look to Trump for inspiration and direction. So here their promise from the Florence Project is that gifts will be matched for dollar to dollar up to $1 million. They're trying to work on services and advocacy. I know they've been involved for a while. They're a non-profit legal service organization providing free legal and social services to adults and unaccompanied children in immigration custody in Arizona. So yes, the government does not provide attorneys for people in immigration removal proceedings. We've all seen probably dramatic recreations of children in custody, in US custody, being made to represent themselves in legal proceedings. So judges asking 2-year-old children to be quiet or to be asking them why they think they should be eligible for asylum in the US. So small children who have been in a position of needing to fend for themselves because they did not have access to any type of legal representation. So here we go. They operate in Tucson, Phoenix, and Florence. Oh, Florence is part of Arizona. Well, that's why it's called the Florence Project then. I was presuming it related to Florence Nightingale. But that's a bit British, isn't it? Okay, it relates to Florence, Arizona. All right, so I can also put up the website for that project that I've just been talking about. So I intend to do this every day as part of my broadcast, try to pick a different charity, just because as we advocate for truth and justice, it is important to remember that there are so many voiceless, powerless people who are suffering as a consequence of our naivety and neglect in the US, that we allowed white supremacy and white nationalism to become such a potent force that even though they are a minority in the US, that they could take over the reins of power and pursue an agenda that does not comport with the majority of Americans. The majority of Americans supported the DREAM Act, were favorably disposed towards children who had been brought to the US as children, that they should be allowed to have opportunities, that if they did not have a criminal record, they should be allowed to pursue education and job opportunities, and that they could be on record on the system, legally monitored, as it were, but still allowed to participate in a formal way in educational and job opportunities. So that was a very popular program. It had, I think, 86%. And I can Google it. Let's have a look. So American support for DREAMer legislation. Poll, huge support for the DREAM Act in 2017. So we don't know. 86, wow, I was right. 86% of Americans support DACA. And then there was also fairly high support for DACA plus more border security. Okay, so I might share this website with you guys so you can see the same graph that I'm seeing. So I don't know the reputability of this website. I'm not speaking for that. Oh, it looks, okay, yeah, I don't want to support that website actually, but I will, if I can stop streaming from there, I will instead switch to the actual tweet that it was quoting from. That was a bad website. I could tell by the evil comics it had. All right, let's have a look. There we go. So now we should be able to see the 86% support that Americans have. That's the tall blue column at the far left. Support DACA. And 62% opposed the proposed border wall by President Trump. So that was in 2017. So the thing about living in a country that's bending towards fascist rule is that popular policies don't get advanced and unpopular policies get advanced because it matters less what people think, and state media and politics become more merged in their presentations. So there's less accountability for government. There's less honest criticism available in the press. So Fox News, and people who watch Fox News often don't watch other news sources. So people who are addicted to Rupert Murdoch's brand of cyclical anxiety and reassurance, which in a way that cultivates racism, anti-migrant positioning, and just generally being very fearful of others. People who watch that crave the type of reassurance that Trump provides in a very culty way, that he is the only person capable of securing America. Fox hides from their viewers all of the ways in which Trump has endangered Americans and degraded American standing in the world, reduced American geopolitical influence, etc., etc. So Let's go back to my Twitter account now, because I'd like to review a tweet thread of somebody who has listened to not that one. Somebody who has listened to the tweet thread of who's listened to the audio footage of Lev Parnas and the leaked audio footage. So for anybody who's not familiar with me, I am Australian and I record on a fairly regular basis. My first ever video went viral, in which I introduced people to my grandmother's experience in Poland, fleeing for her life from a train. So that's why I was encouraged to continue broadcasting my thoughts on the threats to democracy around the world, the threats of too much cover for fascists being provided by people's fearfulness about Islamic terror, and that has provided a big wedge for corrupt people and fossil fuel executives to essentially plot to abuse our trusting nature, to abuse our normalcy bias, the way we just hope that things are fine. And we might look to little local signs. Wealthy white people in America might look to their bank balances, their superannuation funds, 401k, I believe you call it in the US. And people who look at that only as a measure of how is society doing, how is their country doing, could delude themselves into thinking everything's fine. So I'm always here to provide that counterpoint of, no, things are not fine. And whilst white people might not feel, white people who aren't farmers or employed in the manufacturing sector in the US might not feel as immediately the danger that America is in from the constitutional violations that Trump has done and has continued to do in an escalating way, his disregard for the law and his corrupt endorsement of all manner of selling access to his policies, both from hostile foreign leaders such as Vladimir Putin, the Saudi Arabian royalty such as Mohammed bin Salman, but also to destructive corporate interests in the US who don't wish to protect the US or anyone else in the world from the ravages of incredibly destructive and exponentially amplifying climate destabilization. So the type of fires we've experienced in Australia, we have a corrupt coal-captured government that sold out Australian interests to the interests of the Minerals Council of Australia, who advocated for public funds being used to subsidize coal industries rather than renewable energy industries, so that temperatures continued to heat in Australia, and they couldn't even admit how significant the fires were. Our Prime Minister failed to meet with former fire chiefs who were trying to warn him about how dangerous the fire season was going to be in Australia and about the extraordinary measures that would be needed to protect its citizens. Instead, we've had over 30 people lose their lives, thousands of people have lost their homes, and over 1 billion animals have been incinerated in the fires, with millions more starving and dying of thirst as we speak now. So in Australia, it's very apocalyptic. There are fires raging out of control and threatening more people's lives and property today. So it's really a canary in the coal mine situation for the rest of the world to see what happens under a continuing conservative governments. And conservative governments are getting into power because of irrational fear of terrorism over fear of climate change, which looks to be a more gradual threat. That's the nature of humanity. Dying in our beds is something we anticipate as a best case scenario, but dying in a fiery attack, or being stabbed by a terrorist, or buildings collapsing, those type of events have a very powerful grab on the public imagination, on the imagination of individuals. So people often fear that more than they fear this slow unfolding threat over decades of our leaders behaving irresponsibly. But you can see that Greta Thunberg has done a good job of trying to organize people and take advantage of those people who are ruled more rationally than ruled purely by a primal fear of violent death that does exist, but is proportionately a much smaller risk and can be dealt with more easily than this risk of industrialized society continuing on its trajectory of pumping out gases that trap heat in our atmosphere and are slowly cooking our chances of our civilizations existing in the future. Instead, consigning us to a world of scarce water, collapsing agricultural systems, and massively increased extreme weather events, such as those that have devastated Puerto Rico and other areas in the US, coastal areas, where hurricanes and tornadoes have really damaged American property and lives. Oh, I realized I haven't been looking at the comment section. All right, let's have a look. Harvested Beets is there. Thanks, Harvested Beets. I'd forgotten your name. I was looking up for Harvest Beets, and now I see that I was unsuccessful on Periscope to find you and add you as a follow. I'll try harder this time. All right. Randall says hello. He has a channel called Ranting Randy's Rant. I shall check it out. Sure. iPad's Harvested Beets is back. Save the planet, go vegan. Thank you, Tom. Harvested Beets is called Steve. Thank you, Steve. Good to know. Yes, my intention was to go into this thread so we can have a quick read through of some of the details about Trump's conversation. So I'm wondering if I should stop and go back and start a new broadcast with the tag of Trump tweets. Hang on. No, I know what I'll do. I will start an audio recording so that I can make this into a podcast for anybody who has not got the time or the energy or the inclination to watch a live broadcast. Okay, so thanks for tuning in. If you're just tuning in now, I'm going to read through a thread about a meeting that Trump had with some donors, including Lev Parnas. So it's up on the screen there if anybody wants to follow along. So context, Trump appeared at a private donor in April 2018, for a super PAC, although super PACs are not supposed to coordinate with campaigns. I think we could use a stronger word there, actually. I think it's illegal for super PACs to coordinate with campaigns according to campaign finance law. But I am happy to stand to be corrected on that. So the setting was the Trump Hotel in DC. And we were listening to chiefs of industry. This is if you actually listen to this released audio. So it sounds like it's available on the Daily Beast. They have a SoundCloud. You can find it by visiting the Twitter account Ilya Maritz, ILYA But yes, also Google the Daily Beast Lev Parnas audio to listen to the whole tape yourselves. It is, I think, over an hour. So for anybody with that level of interest and commitment, we are going to go through this Twitter summary thread more rapidly than that. So chiefs of industry talking industrial policy with Trump because they are donors to his super PAC. So he tells them that steel plants are opening in the US, which is a lie, but nobody at the dinner contradicts him. No, US Steel is not opening 6 new mills. One donor tells the president that he has 3 plants that are completely idled because of South Korea and Thailand. So Lev is laughing in the background. Donald Trump's view of the EU is a group of countries that got together to screw the United States. So that's interesting, and I'm sure there's a lot of people in the US who are ignorant of European history and the history of world wars in Europe, commencing in Europe and spreading to the rest of the world. and that there's some good reasons for European countries to join together in a union, because cooperation and trade is infinitely preferable to war and devastation that affects the entire world. But yes, Donald Trump doesn't see it like that. His worldview is typically his own interests, and then a weird view in which all other countries are against the US and only he will, like Hitler, will be able to have the courage to say Germany first or America first, etc. So he's talking about writing a letter of recommendation and telling his donors that Kim Jong-un is a great golfer. Oh, that's nice. I've seen lots of endorsements of Kim Jong-un by Donald Trump on video. I've seen him say that the guy is loved by his people. He's talking about North Korea, where millions are starving. It's a police state. People are sent to re-education camps for expressing ideas that are insufficiently supportive of their authoritarian demagogue leader. And Kim Jong-un's own relatives are murdered in extremely brutal and terrifying ways. So I think he put his own uncle in front of some, like he fired him off a battering. Anyway, we don't need to talk about that. But basically, Kim Jong-un is a brutal murderer and dictator. But Trump likes him and thinks he's a good golfer, a great golfer. So they're talking now about border wall construction in the tape, apparently. Trump is describing to them how sharp the points are. Of course, we now know about this border wall, that it's easy to cut through it with a chainsaw that you can buy, a small chainsaw that you can buy from a hardware store. Smugglers have been able to cut holes in the wall that you can pass people through or drugs through. So yes, Trump's ineffective border wall that will just be very effective at killing wildlife that have crossed over to certain areas, but now won't be able to cross back again because they don't have diamond-edged chainsaws. Yes, so really not only separating children from their parents at the border, but also separating animals from their communities as well. Now a donor is comparing the flow of migrants to a water main. Yep. Donald Trump, the whole caravan is a positive thing because it's showing people how crazy it is. Yes, one presumes that the caravan may have received funding from Russia or some other collaborator with Trump, because they or just taking advantage of a natural occurrence. I mean, there are typically caravans each year of migrants who prefer to travel as a group for safety reasons, less likely to be attacked by bandits, and can provide moral support and encouragement for each other. Definitely Fox News uses it to hype people's fear of migrants by treating it as if it's an invasion and exaggerating the numbers of people in the caravan and ascribing negative motivations to those people, that they're invading America rather than being people seeking asylum in a country that is a signatory to the UN Convention on Asylum Seekers, written in 1953, or rather signed by the US in 1954. So the audio is apparently very clear, which is good. Lev Parnas's lawyer released a small edited segment of this audio footage, but they put a Janet Jackson song, I think, over the top, which makes it difficult to listen to. Like, at least it's brief, but the music is distracting. So they're now talking about racist things. Donald Trump is glorifying and exulting in the fact that he called Maxine Waters a very low IQ person, which tends to be the type of insults that he often reserves for African-American people who he deems to be opponents. A donor chimes in that Candace Owens and Kanye are good for outreach to young African-Americans. They're not really. I mean, young African-Americans are still not very supportive of the Trump administration. The figures are very low, but it does serve as a good front for white nationalists who are still emotionally invested in pretending that they're not racist. So Kanye West and Candace Owens probably give a big emotional lift to people who want to pretend that they don't have an undeserved superiority complex in relation to Black Americans, that they don't inherently think that hold negative views about African Americans. They can be like, no, I love Candace Owens. Candace Owens is an African American person who I would elect for president. I've often met racist people who will produce one person of color whom they support. And even as they argue that Puerto Rico shouldn't receive aid, etc., or they argue that it's not part of America, they basically show their priorities, that they don't think people with brown skin are as equally deserving of American aid as other parts of America. But yes, as long as they still have Herman Cain to refer to, they can pretend to themselves that they're not racist because they don't just despise 100% of people of color. The argument obviously has flaws. I have not looked at the comment section for a little while, so let's check the comment section. Harvested Beats says, probably get more watches. What was that in reference to, Harvested Beats, if you're still there? Thanks for sharing to your Twitter page, Randall. Appreciated. Candace Owens is certainly not a great person. Yeah. If we have any people here who are appointed helpers, I totally have no objections if you want to get rid of the troll. Candace Owens is a terrible person, and we don't encourage the promulgation of racist sentiments here. People who love Candace Owens love using her as a shield to conceal their racism to themselves. It's not fooling us. Okay. So Donald Trump asks his listeners, the donors at his party, asks Lev if Russia will go in and take Ukraine. And Lev says they want to, but they're too scared of you, Mr. Trump. Of course, Lev says that knowing Trump would like to hear it. Presumably they're too scared that there'll be a significant outcry in the US and that Trump would feel pushed into a position of having to put sanctions against Russia or lose power. It's always important to remember that fascists, as intimidating and violent as they seem, still do rely on public support and are so indebted in a way to press. And if they don't control 100% of the media, still have vulnerabilities as to what the public think and how the public perceive things. So I think Donald Trump was presuming that the American public would have greater support for a war with Iran. And when it became evident that a war with Iran was not popular, he backed away from escalating that particular military conflict. 34 US servicemen and women have received traumatic brain injuries as a consequence of Iranian retaliation for Trump's assassination of the Iranian second-in-command, Soleimani, who, was not a great guy, but typically civilized nations don't go around assassinating people as a distraction point from their impeachment trials and impeachment hearings. So here we go back to the leaked audio, which is that Lev said that they need to get rid of the ambassador she's left over from the Clinton administration. And Donald Trump, now fairly famously known, says, get rid of her, take her out. It does sound a little bit like he's ordering a hit on her, but it did take him a year to actually fire her. So I guess there's a couple of different readings of it. I was at first very much in favor of highlighting the aggression of that. The take her out is mob language. Trump used it to refer to Soleimani. He said, we took him out. But I guess he's just like a mobster saying, yep, whatever, kill him, take her out. without necessarily completely committing to it at that point, because it was a year before she received a call from a friend in the State Department saying, you have to leave. I mean, it was at 1 o'clock in the morning that she received a call saying, you have to get out of Ukraine now. You have to leave for your safety. So evidently the chatter around a potential assassination attempt on her became so significant at that point that she needed to leave. Interesting. So here is part of the discussion where Lev Parnas is advocating for Donald Trump to look into legalizing marijuana as a way to appeal to, I accidentally scroll down for that, as a way to appeal to millennials in the midterm elections. Did Donald Trump come out in favor of legalizing marijuana? I don't remember. They love talking about gasoline cars. So we're reading that there's a lengthy conversation about compressed natural gas. I like the fact that it will become more public now how much Donald Trump and his donors are obsessed with fossil fuels. So Donald Trump frequently says in public, we got the oil, about Syria. We got the oil. Our troops are there looking after the oil. We got the oil. We've secured the oil. Because more people need to be aware of how much there is a plot, essentially, against the viability of the human race by people who are financially invested in fossil fuels. There are other technologies that have become so efficient now that you can have a power station, a solar, wind, renewable power station up and running within 24 months that can deliver reliable energy to a community. And yet that is not attracting enough government support yet, and billions of taxpayer dollars across the West are still being given to fossil fuel industries that are bringing about significant risks that leads to people's death. I mean, people who live near coal-powered stations are much more likely to die an early death, have children who suffer from respiratory problems, and have increased rates of neurological problems. So yes, there's more immediate death for people who live near coal plants, but more broadly speaking, the people who are dying as a consequence of extreme weather events that are climate driven. There isn't any scientific debate about it. The debate is only between people of bad faith who benefit from coal invested people giving them money. I mean, journalists whose job relies on funding from Rupert Murdoch, who is friends with mining magnates, who has class loyalty to his fellow billionaires. I mean, he had a turnaround in his opinions. At one point, Rupert Murdoch was trying to get his companies to reduce their carbon emission footprint. So who knows what got to Rupert Murdoch at some point, but he reversed his position and became a massive purveyor of climate skepticism and climate denialism. Science denialism, I like to call it, because it's just anti-science. The science is very clear about the dangers we're in, the increasing unpredictability of weather events under climate destabilization. So that's a good term we could use, because climate warming does sound quite gentle. Global warming sounds like just having a nice bath, but on a bigger scale. Let's have a look and see if we have any comments at the moment. Okay, so Randall thinks that Trump never made any progress about legalizing marijuana. The troll asks me, because the troll is still here, we haven't managed to kick off the troll yet, why can't you see the good in Trump? I can do that. I can engage with people who just want a bone of, have I completely ruled out good qualities in Trump? Trump, I can ascribe a good quality to him. He's got a great deal of perseverance, and he's certainly helped people realize that anything is possible. If somebody with Donald Trump's educational and intellectual level can be president of the United States, then a lot of people have realized that they can just have a go and have dreams. So Harvested Beats says he agrees about all the energy alternatives, but something about coming close. Oh, none can come close to the energy density of gasoline. Yes, Harvested Beats, I was wanting to add you in DEJ to to a list of moderators, but I had trouble looking you up, DEJ, on Periscope. I don't know why. Maybe I was misspelling your name. Let's see if I can do it on another device right now, because that would be handy if you guys. In fact, I can first of all just get the troll out myself quickly, and then I might be able to add you guys as well. All right, well, I wonder if that stopped my recording of the audio for a Periscope podcast. Yes, but DEJ the pastor, I would love to add you as a moderator, and you too, Harvested Beats. Randall, I can't add you as a moderator via Periscope because you're on YouTube, but I still see you as well, just so that you know. Now the trolls are being quiet because they know I've prepared myself to block them if I see them comment anymore. All right, so let's go back for a little while then to this discussion of the leaked audio from Trump's donor dinner in April 2018. So they're interested to know how Amazon is doing as a company. These people can talk vehicles and fuels all night long. Yes, not surprising. Lev has a present for Donald from the head rabbi of Ukraine. Oh, that's such a mistake, head rabbi of Ukraine. We should find out if he has a Twitter account and tell him, don't give Trump any more presents. He is endangering Ukraine. Although that rabbi probably knows by now. Yes. So Trump is not massively impressed by the gift, but Lev presumably thought it would impress him because it's some numbers. And Igor Fromm says, you have the same numbers as Messiah. It's like a miracle. Which Messiah is there in the Jewish religion? We don't acknowledge any Messiahs as having come, but I'm not familiar that much, being a relatively secular Jew, a non-practicing Jew. So I don't know about any numbers that portend messiahs, but I still think that sounds very irreligious to tell Donald Trump that he is similar to a messiah in his numbers. Oh, another donor presents Teddy Roosevelt speech, a framed Teddy Roosevelt speech, because Teddy Roosevelt was good at building consensus and speaking very broadly to people in plain language. Sally Katz here. Hello, Sally. Thanks for joining in. Nice to see you. The donor expresses appreciation to be able to make a couple of points and hear how he feels. So indeed, yes, money buys access, and the Citizens United decision of the Supreme Court in 2010 evidently did open up the door to massive amounts of corruption and undue access to people in power through the allowing of super PACs. So yes, it's not fair that people with so much money can just buy access to politicians who then take their points of view into account and make policies and make executive decisions that favor those people who have bought their access to leaders. So yes, Ilya Maritz ends his tweet thread by saying thank you for reading his tweets, and everyone should listen for themselves. We probably should. I hope more and more of it gets picked up by the press, because obviously it's a bit equivalent to Nixon's tapes that helped a lot of Americans accept that Nixon was a crook. And for the holdouts that we have amongst any American citizens who haven't cottoned on yet to the fact that Trump is a president for sale, is a corrupt shyster who has misled people that he would put America's interests first, when he only, in fact, puts himself and his donors' interests first. Sally says she hasn't been in here for a while, but she's been thinking about me and all of the Aussies. Yes, there are still large parts of America on fire. DJ says that he heard the recording about an hour ago, and yes, it is disgusting. I'm surprised that there aren't any more hashtags about it on Twitter, but I guess it's a weekend, so people are struggling a little with being online because they have lives, which is a commendable thing to have, having a life. I will have to go soon because my children were on a play date and they're going to come back. I'll just see if there's anything else that we should talk about. I know it will alienate and frustrate a lot of my followers when I explain that I think Bernie is a destructive player in American politics, and that he has a similarly cult following to Trump, and that he uses that to rail against the establishment, and that any success that Bernie has will mean less success for other Democratic candidates. So I think Bernie will find it hard to campaign for people down ballot because he doesn't like the Democratic Party. He's frequently not been a member of the Democratic Party, and he's one of those people who holds themselves up as the answer to corruption or the answer to wrongdoing, which is not a team player idea and does everyone a disservice, because it means you can't properly analyze what ideas are damaging America. You just attribute it to various people. So you say this person is a problem, this person is a problem, when you need to say Americans have tolerated too much corporate corruption and too much corporate socialism because they endorsed too much the idea that profit will lead to jobs for everyone. And the way to balance that is not to reject corporations and say corporations are evil, profit is bad, greed is bad, but to acknowledge that greed has to be managed. Somebody's ambitions for themselves, when paired with strong regulation, can result in jobs for people and well-regulated capitalism that lifts the fortunes of a nation and still takes care of its citizens and still takes care of its employees. All right. So again, I'm just bringing up this Rachel Maddow observation that Trump asked how long Ukraine would last in a war with Russia, a war that Russia instigated. And Lev Parnas suggests to him 30 seconds, that tape is from April the 13th, and that a year later, Trump withheld all US military aid from Ukraine. So knowing that Ukraine would really struggle not to be defeated and overrun by Russian military forces, Trump denied a US ally the protection of the US military, even though there was bipartisan agreement in using the legislative branch's powers of the purse to dedicate $381 million to the protection of Ukraine, to protect not only Ukraine, but more broadly the interests of America in not allowing Russia to become an unchecked, aggressive military aggressor in the European region. So if Russia can take over Ukraine with impunity, what's to stop Russia from taking over other countries in Europe? So European nations will know this, which is why Donald Trump has such a low approval rating in Europe. And of course, irrational, conservative, right-wing Americans will rejoice in Donald Trump's low approval rating in Europe because they have adopted a contrarian position of resenting all things on the left, resenting Europe, resenting all countries other than the US and allies of Donald Trump, such as Russia. I mean, when you see Trump supporters wearing shirts that say, I'd rather be Russian than a Democrat, then you understand how far that contrarian instinct has separated them from loyalty to their own country and to the people of America. They don't like Americans anymore. They only like their small section of Americans, and they want to rule over the rest of you. This was a clip with Bernie saying that he hadn't costed his plan to not only provide free healthcare, but also free college education. I mean, there's a qualifier. It was free public college education for a number of years, but also relieving the college debt of all people with college debt, which would in a way negate the savings efforts of people who tried to pay off their college debt for themselves, and is therefore not the broadest, not a great approach for building consensus, because Americans do have a preference for saying that you can earn something yourself in America. You can pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And Bernie takes the flaws in that, but takes it too much to the extreme to say, no, the government should provide things for you and should release you from your debt. I would be fine if Bernie ran with a program of maybe making people repay their student debts with simple interest rather than compound, because compound interest is such a backbreaking amount of debt for people with large college loans. And I've saved a meme that somebody created showing, relative to today, how much the minimum wage was in previous generations and how much going to college cost at that time. So how many hours, they calculated how many hours you had to work in a minimum wage job to repay your college debt, and then calculated now how many hours you would need to work in a minimum wage job to pay off your college debt. And the difference was considerable. I need a stronger word than considerable. Oh, more messages. Sally says, I think we're struggling because we know how this trial ends. It would make it difficult to watch, yes. Sally went to see Tom Steyer, who's a decent man and has a lot of focus on climate change. But yes, he's a billionaire, which means people are inherently suspicious of him. Somebody's saying foreign interference, and I think they're accusing me of being foreign interference for being Australian and contributing some political commentary. At least I'm not like Russian intelligence officers who infiltrated America, like literally went to America and pretended to be organizers or helped fund organizers of rallies for Black Lives Matter and for Trump in order to falsely create the impression that there was more support for Trump than existed organically, and also to create Black Lives Matter rallies in order to scare racist white people into voting for Trump. Your youngest daughter started college this year. You are older than me. That's exciting. It will be a big raise for you. Yes, once your children are done with college. College seems to be quite expensive in the US. I have a college debt myself, but it's deferred until I earn a sufficient income to pay it back. So I am paying it back gradually. Black Twitter has diverse views on candidates, but they absolutely hate Bernie Sanders, clearly with good cause after he amplified Joe Rogan. Yes, Democrats should certainly listen to Black voters in general, or listen to reporting on polls of the voting intentions and voting preferences of Black voters. They're too frequently discounted by white political pundits on Twitter when they're a solid Democratic voting base and their opinions are important, and they're less likely to be idealistic dreamers because there's been more negative consequences for people of color in the US under Trump, like visceral consequences, because hate crimes have risen exponentially since Trump took power. So we should be listening to Black voters and caring about their preferences as reported by polls that collect the instincts of people of color who support Joe Biden and would support him even more when he is joined by Kamala Harris, as I imagine he will be, as a running mate. So that's a great combination for getting out the vote. Older, more conservative voters turn out more reliably, and they love Joe Biden. Both Black and white, older conservative voters turn out for somebody like a candidate like Biden because they trust him. He's a known quantity, and he would be useful in helping to restore and repair some of the damage Trump has done on an international level. All of the alliances that he has savaged by being rude about them, by taking steps to impose tariffs, punitive tariffs on American ally countries. Yes. Cipollone just claimed that impeaching a president is election interference. This is the central theme of the Trump presidency. There are no limits on the president. He is your king. yes, that's probably why it's a bit depressing watching this trial, thinking that it's very likely, or it appears very likely at this point, that the Republican senators, who will all have been threatened by Trump, not only politically but possibly aggressively as well. I mean, Trump, after all, is a mob president, that they are quite likely to vote to acquit him. And most of America will actually know at this point that it's a sham acquittal, because there's a very high proportion of Americans who wish to see witnesses. So they won't like it when Republican senators don't vote to allow witnesses and documents. They don't really buy the argument that it's not necessary. Yes, I know who Alexander Downer is. He's a very corrupt, conservative former politician in Australia whose daughter keeps running unsuccessfully for public office, but she also does things like corruptly appear with a huge novelty check with her face on it, giving a sports grant to a bowling community in a marginal district for the political party that her father belonged to, a conservative political party that she herself was running as a candidate of. And the money wasn't hers, the money wasn't from her, it was from the government. So she was corruptly able to print a check with her face on it. Oh, can we mute that person? Don't say Australia wasn't involved. Yeah, Alexander Downer did the one good thing of his life not the one good thing of his life. He's probably done nice things sometimes, but he's corrupt, and he's corrupt in favor of conservatism. But he managed to do the right thing in terms of reporting on a conversation with George Papadopoulos that they had together in a London pub, in which George Papadopoulos drunkenly admitted that Russians had successfully hacked the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, and that they had emails that would be politically damaging to Hillary Clinton. And when I say politically damaging, I mean had the potential to be whipped up and presented in a way as if they were politically damaging to Hillary Clinton, even when there was nothing inherently bad in those emails. Oh, look at that. I just got a notification that said Krager invited 1,371 people. Thanks, Craig. Kind of you. So that's Judge Alexander Downer's role in letting Australian intelligence services know about George Papadopoulos and his confession of his foreknowledge of Russian hacking. And to know about a crime and to not report it is a way to be a criminal accessory after the fact. So George Papadopoulos essentially confessed to being a criminal accessory to Russian cybercrimes against the Democratic nominee. Eventually, that message got back to American intelligence forces from Australian intelligence forces, and that's how an investigation was launched into Donald Trump and his links with Russian assistance. So Mueller was hampered in his investigation by the level of obstruction that we see now with the Ukraine investigation, that Donald Trump has refused to give over documents to allow officials to testify, all of which are very strong indications of guilt, as is the evidence that has evaded Donald Trump's obstructive efforts. So those Republican embedded officials who did testify against Trump, that they were concerned about the contents of his July 25th phone call with Ukrainian president. Even Mike Pence's aide, Jennifer, what's her face? Pence's given a security classification to her conversation. She updated her testimony, presumably to reveal more damaging information about Mike Pence's involvement with the plot to extort the Ukrainian president, to personally to cooperate in Trump's illegal scheme to cheat the 2020 election. His illegal scheme, because it's illegal against campaign finance law to solicit interference from foreign people. And Trump could have organized an investigation into Joe Biden if he thought Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden were worthy of investigation. But instead, Trump sought to covertly instigate a foreign investigation so that he could conceal the origins of the investigation and pretend that it was all organic and worthy. So he could escape the scrutiny that would have occurred if he himself had said, I want to investigate my political rival. He hid it. He made it secret because it's against campaign finance law. And obviously, it's frowned upon to announce investigations of your political rivals up front. So it's illegal to ask foreign people to do your dirty work for you. And it's dirty work because it's, is it illegal? I think it would just not be illegal, but obviously a very obvious betrayal of democratic values to abuse your office as president, to openly call for an investigation into your political opponent. Is it illegal, though? I will leave that to somebody else who's a lawyer to look into that for me. And I will also look into it before I make my next broadcast. So what kind of regulations or laws are there against Donald Trump just asking his own Justice Department to pursue the son of a political rival, such as Joe Biden? What other laws did Trump break? The oversight branch, what's GAO stand for again? The General Accounting and Oversight Branch? That organization that recently publicly announced that Trump had broken the law, the Impoundment Control Act, that says Trump, as the executive branch, cannot interfere with the actions of the legislative branch in terms of he cannot withhold money that the legislative branch has appointed for distribution. So Congress, bipartisan vote, said we will give $391 million to Ukraine of military aid, and Trump secretly put a hold on that. We've had blacked out a lot of emails between the budget office and the Pentagon, etc., all people saying, that's kind of illegal, isn't it? We shouldn't be putting a hold on this money. It's not, according to separation of powers, Donald Trump shouldn't be able to do this, and certainly shouldn't be able to do this secretly. You can challenge money that Congress has appointed, but you have to do it above board. You have to do it publicly. You have to say, I, the president, have some concerns about this, so I'm putting a halt to this payment. You can't go behind the scenes and get Giuliani and your shadow State Department of Lev Parnas and Igor Frum to go around organizing this for you. You can't quietly subvert Congress's money that they're handing out to a US ally that they voted on. You can't undermine the legislative branch like that. So yeah, I think that point is often underemphasized, that Trump was undermining the legislative branch. He was violating the constitutionally mandated separation of powers. That is important to America because it's how you have organized to have opposition to tyranny, checks and balances by having co-equal branches of government that act to check each other, to make sure that no branch devolves into tyranny. Am I getting hit with trolls tonight? I've missed them. Oh yeah, I got Boomer. Oh, whoops, I muted him and I wanted to block him. Dang it, I pressed the wrong button. There we go, now I've blocked him. That's nice. We will not be troubled by OK Boomer again until he creates another account. I like that because he's been bothering me for a little while, but I've just never had my finger on the pulse at the right moment to block that dude. All right, so European countries. Oh, this is an important fact check because European countries have contributed an estimated 2/3 of all the aid to Ukraine since Russia annexed Crimea in 2014 and launched a conflict in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine. So 2/3 of all the aid. That's important because Trump lies to the American public and the world, pretending that only the US has given aid to Ukraine. And he tries to fit that into a story of the US is overburdened with giving aid to other people. The US needs to have a little corrective, be more selfish and just look after ourselves. But what he really means is that's his cover story for letting Russia take over more of the world. And it's very important to unpack what Trump's lies achieve for Trump and his allies. And his allies are authoritarian-minded Americans who want to make sure no American women are able to access abortion services and are always forced to proceed with a pregnancy even when they don't want to. And Trump's other allies are the mafia-like government of Russia, Vladimir Putin and his enablers, and Trump's other allies are the Saudi Arabian royalty that he's sold American nuclear technology to, so that they can make trouble in the Mideast. Another of Trump's allies, and this is a difficult one for Americans to cope with, the corrupt president of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, who similarly to Trump has been indicted with, well, no, a step further than Trump. We know Trump should be indicted for criminal charges. He's unindicted co-conspirator one in various legal matters. But Benjamin Netanyahu literally is not unindicted co-conspirator. He's been indicted, but he, plays the Trump card of saying it's all political, I shouldn't be held accountable, and I will fight being indicted. Desi Cool is someone who's actually tried to watch the Trump lawyers present Trump's defense today. Good for you. I couldn't make myself do that. Yes. Oh, look, more fact checking. I'm just going to click on this to have a little look at what I might do. Copy link address, and then I can post it here in the comments section so that anybody can see that link for themselves if they want to click on it. That's not very useful, that link then, is it? Because it doesn't really show what it's doing. All right, we'll leave that. So fact-checking Trump's false claim that the US is the only country providing aid to Ukraine. Oh, have I got any more water? I've run out. Someone is saying that they're from Halifax in Canada. Hello. Yes, well, we know Russia has blackmail material on Republicans because of an article that was published in Dallas News sometime last year or the year before, showing how much campaign funding Republican candidates had received from Russian-associated oligarchs, so Ukraine American oligarchs, etc., just essentially money via corrupt Russian people. All right, let's look at this more. Astonishing disconnect that Trump believes he has every right to force a foreign government to investigate American private citizens because the European Union hasn't paid their fair share. Yep, it's a lie about the European Union not having paid their fair share, and it's not okay to force a foreign government to investigate private American citizens. There's lots of statutes about corruption to prevent corruption from American businessmen and women that would have helped prosecute Hunter Biden or investigate Hunter Biden within America. America does not outsource investigations to foreign countries. So there's so many reasons why Trump's arguments have no merit. But when you're fighting fascism, you're fighting irrational enthusiasm for a leader who's managed to bring on board a strong 30 to 40% of people who are no longer capable of thinking rationally about Trump because they've conflated him in their mind. They've melded the two concepts together, Trump and America. So in their mind, America can only be protected by protecting Trump. America can only be secured by protecting Trump from investigation or challenges of any description. So I often talk about the economic pressures on the US created by Trump, who is damaging the US economy as well as damaging US geopolitical influence, geopolitical standing in the world, just undoing a lot of work that has gone into making America at least partly a force for good around the world, and a powerful advocate for its own interest, making America a superpower with strong allies and good relationships with lots of countries. So this is how the Trump and Giuliani operation against Joe Biden was essentially financed by Russian mafia, because if we look at this article from NBC News, the oligarch linked to a $1 million loan to Lev Parnas, Dmitry Firtash, has a shadowy past, i.e. is a Putin mob friend. So let's click on that and have a look. Is that now showing up? Who is Dmitry Firtash? I like it. This is being published by NBC News. Let's check what's streaming now. No. Okay. Take that away. And then share a screen with this new article. Dun, dun, dun. Technology. Thank you. The billionaire oligarch is at the dead center of the greatest corruption operation in Ukraine's history. There he is. He's in Vienna. I think is he being held in Vienna awaiting extradition? So this article is published today, January the 26th. 1 month before Lev Parnas was indicted on campaign finance charges, his wife received wire transfers from a bank account in Russia. The sum was $1 million, and the source was a lawyer for Dmytro Firtash, a Ukrainian oligarch who made a fortune in the natural gas trade. A billionaire with alleged ties to the Russian mob, Firtash is facing bribery-related charges in the US and fighting extradition from Vienna. So he once attempted to buy and redevelop a hotel in New York with Paul Manafort, who's now in jail and is Donald Trump's former campaign chairman. And he's seen by Ukrainian anti-corruption activists and Western governments as a corrupt instrument of Russia. So he gave money to Lev Parnas, which is why we take Lev Parnas's pronouncements with a grain of salt, but we welcome the fact that he does release live audio of Trump's corrupt conversations with super PAC donors and conversations with Lev Parnas himself, who Trump pretends not to know. Hello, Craig. 30% exactly is all it took in Nazi Germany. Americans need to hit the streets. Obviously, they don't cherish their democracy. Normalcy bias is a powerful force, and a lot of people are working hard to overcome that. So I like to stress the positive, because an article I was promoting the other day was, and I can put it up for you, Political Hobbyists Are Ruining Politics, which suggests that all of the energy that white college-educated people are putting into reading the news is paling besides the actual volunteering and activism of people who are more directly invested in overturning fascism. So people from minority communities who are out there volunteering, etc. So white college people who are knocking doors, good for you, but primarily, apparently, according to surveys, we're just consuming the news and not acting on it. So we can't. Minority people know that they can't afford to fall into cynicism. We have to make sure we avoid that trap for ourselves as well. We can't just be cynical and wash our hands of what's happening, even if it's a realistic appraisal of the situation, to say there's a lot of obstacles in the way of justice, and there's a lot of obstacles in the way of a functional democracy at this point. We have to ally ourselves with the people who are still doing something, even when fascism was much more advanced in taking over the world during the era of Hitler and fascism and the axis of Italy and Japan and Germany and Russia at various points. They kept fighting, and they had to sacrifice a lot more than we're sacrificing or appear to be exposed to in terms of sacrifice. So we can't just sit here and make negative pronouncements. We have to keep finding and brainstorming ways to overcome Trump brand fascism. That is my mission statement and my firm intention. All right, let's see if we've got some more comments. I will go soon because my children are coming home. I will put up a banner. This is my YouTube channel, just for people who are watching on Patreon, if not Patreon, Periscope, if you want to also see the videos I put up to YouTube. Anybody who subscribes to my YouTube account would be doing me a big favor as well, because if I build influence through the YouTube algorithm, through having more subscribers, that will help more people watch my output, which would be handy. And if you want to contribute more directly to supporting what I do, that is the name of my Patreon account, DavChat. I should change it to DavCat, but at the present it's still DavChat, and I'll look into that today. Changing it to make sure I have a more uniform branding of what it is I'm doing. This is new media. This is media that is not corporate funded media, that is not controlled by CEOs who benefit significantly from Trump tax cuts. I am a housewife with a master's degree who is, but not in political punditry or anything, in a separate field, but is still interested in bringing you whatever analysis and synthesis of developments that I can bring you, with the intention of building consensus around the need to oppose fascism, around the need to oppose the essentially international conspiracy of fossil fuel investors and fossil fuel executives and their allies to subjugate the human race to a sort of doom scenario whereby we don't adequately address the risks to human civilization posed by climate change, which is far more serious than most people realize. I have a degree in science, and it's very significant what's happening. Admittedly, my science degree doesn't focus that much on the biological sciences, but I have enough exposure to know that the oceans are heating so exponentially that there is likely to be a devastated aquamarine industry sooner than people expect, that extreme weather events, fires, droughts, hurricanes, tornadoes are likely to exponentially increase, and that a world with 2 degrees temperature increase is devastating to all of the billions of lives that currently exist on planet Earth. So I try not to say save the planet anymore. The situation is pretty dire. Oh, Harvested Beats teaches biology and environmental science. That's awesome. I invite you to come in and talk on the show. If you don't know, I can have audio guests if you're keen to just have your voice on, if you're not worried that would jeopardize your anonymity too much. But I can also have guests appear in a shared screen. I'm glad that so much of what I discuss is important to you. Thank you. That means a lot to me. I respect your intelligence and your commentary, Harvested Beats. So yes, if you want to come on, you have an open invitation, because I would like to spend more time discussing, unpacking science and making it more accessible for people who haven't had the opportunity to go to university and attend a science-related course. Because you can have a university education in commerce and business and have no idea about the threats that we're under, because it's underreported in the press. Thank you, Desi Cool. Appreciated. Here we go. I do have volunteers who help me with things like technological help. So I have a follower who helped me find this website that you can use to stream live simultaneously to YouTube and Periscope. I have another radio producer friend who helped me get appropriate microphones so that I could do that. I have 4 generous Patreons who pay a monthly donation ranging from $5 to $50 a month, which blows my mind, quite frankly, but firms my commitment to keeping this up, because clearly it's important enough to people that they are willing to support with their funds this branch of new media. I call myself a branch. I need to say something more appropriately to size. this particular iteration, this me with a microphone, currently a housewife, but not an American citizen or an American resident, but still sharing my concern about the pathway to fascism, having had family members directly affected by fascism, having grandparents that managed to survive the Holocaust and great-grandparents who were murdered in gas chambers. When I hear about gas chamber areas being marked by nail marks of people, not knowing their fate, just being plunked in here and then scratching at the walls, desperately trying to get out as gas was pumped into the chamber, knowing that companies around the world, engineering companies, helped the Nazis construct those gas chambers. I feel it's incumbent upon me to point out pathways to fascism that we are on, and the fact that there are children imprisoned now whose parents were told, we're just taking your children off for a bath, and then didn't bring their children back. That level of inhumanity reached by the Trump administration shows what pathway we're on and what is already occurring under Trumpism. Yes, talking without a pic would be perfectly wonderful, Harvested Beats. I would do a broadcast just to Periscope so that I could avail myself of that Periscope technology of accepting an audio guest. So you'd need to download the Periscope app and be prepared to click on a little icon at the bottom of the right of your screen with two faces on it. So you just need to play around with that a little bit. You can probably play around now if you look on the right-hand corner of your screen. Bottom right corner, I should say. Thank you, Brian, for your compliment. Okay, I can't see it right now, but yes, play with that until you can see two small face icons, because that's the button you can click if I'm doing a broadcast just to Periscope. That means you could be accepted as a guest on my show. Yes, and thank you again to the Patreons. Your generosity and your support is so amazing and helps me devote more of my life to doing this, because it helps my family as well to say that I'm making a contribution to the family and helping defray the expenses of buying microphones and things like that, and paying for the monthly cost of hosting or having a platform on StreamYard that allows me to broadcast to both Periscope and YouTube. Oh, you know how to join already. Great. That's fantastic. All right, well, direct message me a time. Do you follow me on Twitter? Direct message me times that would be convenient for you, and we can chat sometime. That would be awesome. One of the reasons why I broadcast is feeling that it's so important to break down things that are happening into smaller, more digestible chunks to build consensus, because fascists have more enthusiasm than us. They're often very zealous bigots, but decent people have numbers. We just need to remember that we have the numbers, and we need to fight overwhelm. So not be overwhelmed by the details of all the corruption, be overwhelmed by trying to follow all of the various mafia entanglements, corrupt appointees by the Trump administration, etc. Thank you so much, Harvested Beats. I appreciate your support and encouragement. To my other Patreons as well, thank you. Have a great day, everyone. I will try to broadcast tomorrow at, what time is it, Pacific Standard Time? I'll check. Okay, so 9 a.m. my time is 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Pacific time. So hopefully that will help people calculate what time it would be for them if I manage to make progress with my intention of regularly broadcasting at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So wish me luck with that, because I want to build up an audience, and you can do that more by having a regular point of time for broadcasting so that people know when they'll see you and know when to tune in. Thank you so much to all your support. Thanks, Desi Cool. Cheerios. So that would be 6 p.m. Central Time. Okay, perfect. Fantastic. 6 p.m. Central Time, 9 a.m. where I am. Wishing you all the best. Have a great day, and talk to you again soon. Good. I'm glad you agree. Thanks, Harvested Beats. Regular times are good. Bye, everyone. Take care of yourselves and each other.